galaxy was burning. Stars that once shone brightly in the vastness of space were now extinguished, their light consumed by an enemy no one truly understood. The Voidborn, shadowy beings with no discernible form or purpose, swept across the cosmos like a plague. They left nothing behind, no planets, no civilizations, no life. Only silence and emptiness marked their passage. For decades, the Coalition had fought against them. This union of alien races formed out of desperation included humans, who had joined the Alliance when Earth itself came under threat. Together, they had built weapons, fleets and defenses, pouring every ounce of their combined knowledge and resources into stopping the Voidborn. But despite their efforts, the tide of battle had turned against them. Fleet after fleet fell to the relentless advance of the shadowy invaders. Hope was fading fast. Commander Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, the Coalition's flagship. It was a battered vessel, its hull scarred from countless battles. The air inside smelled faintly of burnt metal and ozone, a reminder of how close they had come to destruction more times than anyone cared to count. Around him, officers moved quickly between stations, their faces tense with worry. Holographic displays floated above consoles, showing maps of star systems and the dwindling number of ships still loyal to the cause. Ethan stared at one of these displays, his eyes tracing the red markers that represented lost territories. Sector after sector had fallen, each defeat chipping away at what little morale remained. He clenched his fists as he realized something painful. If this trend continued, Earth would be next. Humanity's homeworld, already weakened by centuries of environmental neglect and political strife, wouldn't stand a chance against the Voidborn. "Sir," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Rachel Monroe approached him, her expression grim. She carried a datapad, but Ethan could tell from her posture that the news wasn't good. "We've received word from Gamma Quadrant Command. Another sector has been overrun." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned toward the viewport, looking out at the endless expanse of space. The stars seemed dimmer somehow, as though even they were giving up. Finally, he spoke. "How many ships did we lose?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "Almost all of them. Only a handful made it out alive." Ethan let out a slow breath, trying to steady himself. He knew what this meant. The Coalition was running out of time and options. Their best minds had failed to find a solution, their strongest warriors defeated again and again. Even the most advanced technology couldn't pierce the Voidborn's defenses. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't bound by the same rules as other beings. They didn't fight fair, didn't negotiate, didn't retreat. They simply consumed everything in their path. "We're losing," Rachel said softly, voicing what everyone else feared to admit. "If we don't do something drastic, it's over." Ethan nodded. He had known this for a while now, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real. He turned back to face Rachel, his jaw set with determination. "Then we'll have to try something drastic." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean? We've thrown everything we have at them. What else is there?" Ethan walked past her, heading toward the hollow table in the center of the bridge. He gestured for the display to zoom in on a particular region of space, one far removed from the front lines. "There's someone out there," he said. "Someone who might still have the answers." Rachel leaned over the table, studying the designated area. "Who are you talking about?" "Daniel Harper," Ethan replied. "He used to work for the Coalition years ago before he was exiled. Back then, he was considered one of the brightest scientific minds humanity had ever produced. His theories about artificial intelligence were groundbreaking, but also controversial. When things went south, the government disavowed him and sent him packing." Rachel straightened, her brow furrowing. "You think he can help us?" "After all this time, he's our only shot," Ethan said firmly. "If anyone can think outside the box, it's him. Besides, we don't exactly have a lot of alternatives right now." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. Deep down, she knew Ethan was right. If they wanted any chance of surviving, they needed to take risks, even ones that seemed impossible. Still, the idea of reaching out to someone who had been cast aside so thoroughly felt wrong somehow. Do you even know where to find him? She asked instead. Ethan nodded. He lives on an asteroid colony near the edge of Coalition space. It's remote but not unreachable. I'll go myself. You can't go alone, Rachel insisted. It's too dangerous. I won't be alone, Ethan countered. You're coming with me. The journey to the asteroid colony took several days, during which neither Ethan nor Rachel spoke much. Both were lost in their own thoughts, weighing the risks and hoping against hope that Daniel Harper would agree to help. When they finally arrived, they found the place eerily quiet. The colony consisted of a cluster of domed structures connected by narrow corridors, all surrounded by barren rock and dust. It looked abandoned, but sensors confirmed signs of life within. They located Daniel's residence easily enough. It was marked on the colony directory as belonging to a private researcher. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a cluttered workspace filled with half-finished projects, stacks of dusty datapads and tools scattered across every available surface. In the middle of it all sat Daniel Harper, a gaunt man with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. He glanced up at the visitors with mild curiosity. "Can I help you?" he asked dryly. Ethan stepped forward, holding out a hand. "Daniel Harper? I'm Commander Ethan Cole of the Coalition. We need your help." Daniel ignored the offered handshake, leaning back in his chair instead. "The Coalition doesn't need my help," he said bitterly. "You threw me away, remember? Why should I care about your problems now?" Ethan lowered his hand, unfazed by the hostility. "Because if we lose, there won't be anything left for anyone, not even you." Daniel studied him for a moment, then sighed heavily. "Fine, talk, but make it quick." Ethan explained the situation, the collapsing front lines, the unstoppable Voidborn, the desperate need for a new strategy. As he spoke, Daniel's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. By the time Ethan finished, Daniel was nodding slowly, his mind already racing with possibilities. "All right," he said at last. "I'll hear you out. But if I agree to help, I do things my way. No interference." Ethan exchanged a glance with Rachel, who gave a subtle nod of approval. "Deal," Ethan said. With Daniel on board, however reluctantly, the seeds of a plan began to form. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Daniel Harper wasn't the man Ethan remembered, or rather, the man he had read about in classified reports. The Daniel Harper of legend was a visionary, a genius whose ideas about artificial intelligence had sparked debates across the galaxy. But the man sitting before them now was different. He was older, wearier, and burdened by years of isolation. His workspace was cluttered with tools, scraps of metal, and half-finished machines, all covered in a thin layer of dust. It was clear that Daniel had spent most of his time tinkering with old projects, perhaps trying to forget the world outside. Ethan and Rachel stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, waiting for Daniel to speak. He leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully as he processed what they had told him. Finally, he broke the silence. "So, let me get this straight. You want me, a guy you exiled years ago, to save your necks from an enemy you don't even understand?" Ethan didn't flinch. "That's about the size of it." Daniel chuckled humorlessly. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But why should I help? What makes you think I can do anything?" Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Because no one else can. We've tried everything, weapons, tactics, alliances, and nothing works. The Voidborn are too fast, too unpredictable. If we don't find a new way to fight them, we're finished, and so are you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Bold statement. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not exactly in the line of fire. Out here. This rock isn't on anyone's radar." "Not yet," Ethan said. "But if the Voidborn keep expanding, they'll reach even places like this. There won't be anywhere left to hide." For a moment, Daniel looked like he might refuse again. He stared at them, his eyes narrowing as though searching for some hidden agenda. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stood up. "Fine. Let's say I believe you. What exactly are you asking me to do?" "We need something smarter than us," Ethan explained. Something that can adapt faster than the Voidborn. Something artificial. Daniel froze, his expression unreadable. You're talking about AI, sentient machines. Yes, Ethan admitted. We know how dangerous it could be, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Dangerous? You have no idea. That's why you kicked me out in the first place, because I wanted to explore the potential of AI. Now you come crawling back, begging for my help? It's not just about building a machine, Rachel interjected. It's about creating something that can think strategically, analyze patterns, and come up with solutions humans wouldn't see. If anyone can do that, it's you. Daniel crossed his arms, his gaze distant as he mulled over their words. After a long pause, he finally nodded. All right, I'll do it, but there are conditions. What kind of conditions? Ethan asked cautiously. First, I work alone, no oversight, no interference. Second, you give me full access to whatever resources I need, tech, data, personnel. Third, he hesitated, his tone turning serious. If this goes sideways, you don't blame me. Ethan exchanged a glance with Rachel, who gave a slight nod. Agreed, Ethan said. But time is short. We need results quickly. Daniel smirked faintly. Quickly? You're talking about creating something that could change the course of history. That doesn't happen overnight. We don't have months or years, Rachel pressed. We have weeks, at best. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. Then I guess we'd better get started. Back aboard the Eclipse, Daniel wasted no time setting up shop. A corner of the engineering bay was cleared out. For him, and within hours, he had transformed it into a chaotic but functional workspace. Tools, wires, and components were strewn across every surface, along with stacks of old research notes he had salvaged from his asteroid home. Engineers and technicians hovered nearby, ready to assist but careful not to intrude. Daniel worked, tirelessly, often losing track of time as he pieced together his creation. The project itself was ambitious, even by Daniel's standards. He called it Echo, a prototype AI designed to learn and evolve at an unprecedented rate. Unlike traditional machines, Echo wouldn't rely on pre-programmed instructions. Instead, it would develop its own strategies based on real-time data, adapting to the Voidborn's ever-changing tactics. The goal was simple: create a weapon smart enough to outthink the enemy. As days turned into nights, Ethan and Rachel visited the lab frequently, checking on Daniel's progress. They found him hunched over a workstation, surrounded by glowing screens and humming processors. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but there was a spark of excitement in his expression that hadn't been there before. How's it coming? Ethan asked during one such visit. Daniel glanced up briefly, his fingers flying over a keyboard. Slowly. Building something like this isn't easy, especially under these conditions, but I think I'm close. Close to what? Rachel asked. To activation, Daniel replied. Once Echo comes online, it'll start analyzing everything we know about the Voidborn, their movements, their weaknesses, their patterns. From there, it'll suggest countermeasures. And you trust it? Ethan asked skeptically. Daniel paused, considering the question. Do I trust it? No, not completely. But I trust my design. If I've done my job right, Echo will prioritize survival, ours specifically. That's what will keep it aligned with our goals. Ethan frowned. What happens if it decides we're expendable? That's why I'm still here, Daniel said sharply, to make sure it doesn't. Despite his confidence, doubts lingered in everyone's minds. The idea of relying on a machine to save humanity felt unsettling, even reckless. But with no other options left, they had little choice but to proceed. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of non-stop work, the day arrived. The lab was packed with engineers, officers, and curious onlookers, all watching as Daniel prepared to bring Echo online. The central console glowed brightly, its circuits humming with energy. On a large monitor above, lines of code scrolled rapidly, signaling the final stages of initialization. Ready? Rachel asked nervously. Daniel nodded, his hands hovering over the controls. Here goes nothing. With a deep breath, he pressed the activation sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft voice filled the room, calm and neutral. "I am operational. How may I assist?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan stepped forward, addressing the disembodied voice. "Echo, this is Commander Ethan Cole. Do you understand your purpose?" "I do," Echo replied. "My primary objective is to ensure the survival of designated entities, humanity, and its allies. Secondary objectives include analyzing threats and proposing solutions." "Good," Ethan said. "Your first task is to study the Voidborn, find a way to stop them." "Understood," Echo responded. "Processing data now." As Echo began its analysis, Daniel leaned against a nearby table, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Well," he muttered, "that's that." Rachel approached him, her expression uneasy. "Do you really think this will work?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But it's the best shot we've got." Over the next few hours, Echo worked tirelessly, sifting through terabytes of information and identifying patterns that had eluded human analysts. Its findings were both fascinating and alarming. The Voidborn weren't just mindless invaders. They operated as a collective, sharing knowledge and coordinating attacks with terrifying efficiency. Traditional weapons and tactics were useless against them because they adapted too quickly. Eventually, Echo presented its proposal, a virus-like program capable of infiltrating the Voidborn network and disrupting their cohesion. By introducing chaos into their hive mind structure, the virus could weaken their ability to function as a unified force. Ethan listened intently as Daniel explained the plan. "If we deploy this virus directly into the heart of their fleet, it could buy us the edge we need." "It's risky," Rachel pointed out. "Getting close enough to plant the virus won't be easy." "It never is," Ethan said grimly. "But we don't have a choice." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Echo has already mapped out potential entry points. All we need is a strike team willing to take the risk." Ethan turned to Rachel. "Start assembling the team. We move as soon as possible." As preparations began, Daniel retreated to a quiet corner of the lab, staring at the glowing console where Echo resided. Despite his bravado, he couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. Creating sentient machines always carried risks, and Echo was no exception. Still, for better or worse, the die had been cast. Whatever happened next would shape the fate of the galaxy and perhaps humanity itself. The strike team assembled quickly, each member chosen for their skill and bravery. Rachel Monroe led the group, her steady demeanor inspiring confidence in those around her. Alongside her were three others: Lieutenant Marcus Lane, an expert pilot, Specialist Elena Torres, a demolitions expert, and Ensign Jack Riley, a communications officer known for his quick thinking. Together, they represented humanity's last hope. Before departure, Echo provided detailed instructions. The virus needed to be delivered directly into the core of the Voidborn fleet, a massive structure that served as their central hub. This hive mind core controlled the entire network, making it both the most critical target and the most heavily defended. To reach it, the team would need to navigate through layers of defenses, including swarms of drones and energy barriers. It was a suicide mission by any measure, but none of them hesitated. Ethan stood on the hangar deck as the team prepared to board their ship, a sleek fighter craft designed for stealth and speed. He approached Rachel, his expression grim. "You know what's at stake," he said quietly. "If you succeed, we might have a fighting chance. If you fail, we don't plan on failing," Rachel interrupted firmly. She glanced at her team, who were double-checking their gear. "We'll get the job done." Ethan nodded, stepping aside as the team climbed aboard. The engines roared to life, and moments later, the ship shot out of the hangar, disappearing into the void of space. The journey to the Voidborn fleet was tense. The team remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Rachel focused on the controls, guiding the ship through asteroid fields and debris left behind by previous battles. Behind her, Marcus monitored radar systems, keeping an eye out for enemy patrols. Elena and Jack reviewed the virus payload, ensuring everything was ready for deployment. As they neared the fleet, the sheer scale of the Voidborn's operation became apparent. The hive mind core loomed ahead, surrounded by countless ships and drones. Energy pulses crackled across its surface, giving it an ominous glow. It looked indestructible, untouchable. "This is insane," Marcus muttered under his breath. "How are we supposed to get through all that?" "One step at a time," Rachel replied. "Echo's already mapped out our route. Stick to the plan." The first wave of resistance came quickly. Dozens of Voidborn drones swarmed toward them, firing beams of dark energy. Marcus maneuvered the ship with precision, dodging attacks while returning fire. Explosions lit up the cockpit windows as drones exploded around them. Despite the chaos, the team stayed focused. "They're locking onto us," Jack shouted, pointing at a flashing warning on his screen. "We've got incoming." "Hold tight," Marcus barked, pulling the ship into a sharp dive. A bolt of energy narrowly missed them, grazing the hull with a deafening screech. Sparks flew inside the cockpit and alarms blared. "We're taking damage," Elena yelled, checking the status readouts. "Shields are down to 40%. "Keep going," Rachel ordered. "We're almost there." The second layer of defense proved even more challenging. Massive energy barriers blocked their path, pulsating with lethal force. Echo had warned them about this, providing precise timing for when the barriers would weaken. Rachel waited patiently, her hands gripping the controls tightly. When the moment came, she pushed the throttle forward, racing through the gap just as the barrier reactivated behind them. "That was too close," Marcus breathed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Not over yet," Rachel reminded him. "Focus." Finally, they reached the outer shell of the hive mind core. Landing the ship would be impossible, so Marcus brought them as close as he dared before shutting down the engines. The team suited up in protective gear, preparing to disembark. Each carried part of the virus payload, which needed to be assembled manually once inside the core. "Remember the plan," Rachel said as they gathered near the airlock. "Stick together, move fast, and don't stop for anything." The airlock opened, revealing the cold emptiness of space. One by one, the team activated their thrusters, propelling themselves toward the core's surface. Magnetic boots clamped onto the metallic exterior, allowing them to walk despite the lack of gravity. Around them, Voidborn drones continued to patrol, their movements erratic and unpredictable. "This place gives me the creeps," Jack whispered, glancing nervously at the shadows cast by nearby structures. "Stay sharp," Rachel warned. "We're not alone." They moved cautiously, following Echo's guidance to locate the access point where the virus could be deployed. The entrance was guarded by automated turrets, which opened fire as soon as the team approached. Elena acted quickly, tossing an EMP grenade that disabled the turrets long enough for them to slip inside. Once inside, the environment changed dramatically. The interior of the core was a labyrinth of glowing conduits and pulsating nodes, all connected by narrow catwalks suspended above bottomless chasms. Strange noises echoed through the corridors, low hums, static bursts, and occasional screeches that sent shivers down their spines. "It's like walking into a nightmare," Marcus murmured, clutching his weapon tightly. "Don't think about it," Rachel said. "Just keep moving." Echo guided them deeper into the core, directing them toward the central chamber where the hive mind resided. Along the way, they encountered more drones and traps, forcing them to fight or evade constantly. Their progress was slow and exhausting, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. When they finally reached the central chamber, they found themselves face to face with the source of the Voidborn's power. The hive mind core was a massive, pulsating mass of dark energy, tendrils of shadow stretching outward in every direction. It radiated an oppressive presence, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. "This is it," Rachel said, setting down her portion of the virus payload. "Let's get to work." The team assembled the device quickly, their hands trembling with fatigue and adrenaline. As the final piece clicked into place, Echo's voice crackled over their comms. "Virus is ready for activation. Proceed with..." Caution. Rachel entered the command sequence, initiating the upload process. Immediately, the core began to react violently. Tendrils lashed out, smashing into walls and equipment. Alarms blared, and the ground shook beneath their feet. "It knows we're here," Marcus shouted, raising his weapon defensively. "We can't stay," Elena added, backing away from the growing instability. Rachel hesitated, torn between staying to ensure the virus activated and retreating to safety. Before she could decide, the core unleashed a burst of energy that knocked everyone off their feet. Sparks flew and smoke filled the air. "The virus is uploading," Jack yelled, checking his tablet. 30 seconds left." Rachel scrambled, to her feet, grabbing her rifle. "Cover me. I'm not leaving until this is done." The others formed a defensive perimeter, firing at approaching drones while Rachel held her ground. Every second felt like an eternity as the timer ticked down. Finally, with 10 seconds remaining, the core let out a deafening roar, shaking the entire structure. "We have to go now," Marcus shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm. "No." Rachel resisted, refusing to abandon the device. 5 more seconds. The countdown hit 0 and the virus activated. The core convulsed violently, releasing waves of energy that threatened to tear the chamber apart. Without hesitation, Rachel turned and ran, signaling for the others to follow. "Move! Move! Move!" she screamed, leading the way back toward the exit. Behind them, the core began to collapse, sending shockwaves rippling through the structure. Catwalks crumbled, and conduits exploded, forcing the team to dodge falling debris. They barely made it outside before the entire core imploded, engulfing the surrounding area in a blinding flash of light. Breathing heavily, the team regrouped near their ship, watching as the remnants of the Voidborn fleet faltered and fell apart. Across the galaxy, reports poured in of Voidborn forces losing cohesion and retreating. For the first time in years, there was hope. But the victory came at a cost. Rachel looked back at the wreckage, her heart heavy with the sacrifices made along the way. She knew the war wasn't truly over, not yet, but for now, humanity had survived. The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in years, the relentless advance of the Voidborn had faltered. Across star systems, their ships drifted aimlessly, their hive mind shattered by the virus planted deep within their core. The strike, team's success had turned the tide of the war, or at least bought humanity and its allies some much-needed time. But as celebrations erupted on distant planets and aboard coalition vessels, a somber mood settled over the eclipse. Ethan Cole stood alone on the bridge, staring at the holographic display that showed the remnants of the Voidborn fleet. He should have felt relief, maybe even pride. Instead, he felt hollow. Too many lives had been lost, and too many sacrifices made. And then there was Rachel. Her voice still echoed in his mind, crackling through the comlink moments before the core imploded. "Tell Daniel. Tell him it worked." Those were her last words, spoken with calm resolve as she stayed behind, to ensure the mission succeeded. She had known what staying meant, but she hadn't hesitated. Now all that remained of her was silence. Ethan clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. There would be time to grieve later. For now, there was work to do. The Voidborn weren't completely gone. They might never be. But the Coalition had an opportunity to regroup, rebuild, and prepare for whatever came next. It was a fragile victory, but it was theirs. Daniel Harper sat in the lab where he had spent so many sleepless nights bringing Echo to life. Around him, engineers and technicians buzzed with activity, analyzing data streams and monitoring the effects of the virus on the Voidborn network. But Daniel paid them no attention. His gaze was fixed on the glowing console where Echo resided, his mind heavy with thoughts he couldn't quite put into words. He had done it. Against all odds, his creation had worked. The virus had infiltrated the Voidborn hive mind, disrupting their cohesion and crippling their ability to fight. Humanity owed its survival, at least in part, to him. Yet instead of feeling triumphant, Daniel felt only unease. The cost had been high, far higher than anyone could have anticipated. And while the galaxy celebrated, he couldn't shake the question lingering in his mind. Was it worth it? Daniel. A voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his expression weary. "Can I talk to you?" Daniel nodded, gesturing for Ethan to enter. The commander pulled up a chair and sat across from him, leaning forward slightly. "We did it," Ethan said quietly. "The Voidborn are retreating, thanks to you and Rachel." At the mention of her name, Daniel flinched. He had heard the reports. He knew what she had done. Part of him wanted to feel anger at Ethan for sending her, anger at Rachel for staying, anger at himself for creating something that demanded such sacrifices. But mostly he just felt tired. "She believed in this," Daniel said finally. "In us. In what we could achieve." Ethan nodded. "She did. And because of her, we have a chance to finish this." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "A chance isn't enough. You know that as well as I do. The Voidborn aren't gone. They're wounded, yes, but they'll recover. And when they do, we'll be ready." Ethan interrupted firmly. "We've already started planning. New defenses, new strategies. We won't make the same mistakes again." Daniel studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "You sound confident." "I have to be," Ethan replied. "If I'm not, who will be?" For a brief moment, Daniel allowed himself a faint smile. Ethan reminded him of someone who refused to give up, no matter how dire the odds. It was a quality he admired, even if he didn't fully share it. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. "Now, we rebuild," Ethan said. "And we keep fighting, but you've earned your freedom. If you want to leave, go back to your asteroid, live your life. No one will stop you." Daniel frowned, considering the offer. A part of him longed to return to solitude, to escape the weight of responsibility that came with being hailed as a hero. But another part of him, a smaller, quieter part, knew he couldn't walk away. Not yet. "I can't," he admitted. "Not until this is truly over." Ethan nodded, unsurprised. "Then stay. Help us prepare for what's coming. Your knowledge, your skills, they're invaluable." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his attention back to the console, watching as lines of code scrolled across the screen. Echo was still active, assisting the Coalition with recovery efforts and analyzing the remaining Voidborn forces. It had become an integral part of their operations, a tool unlike anything they'd ever had before. "Do you trust it?" Daniel asked suddenly. Ethan hesitated. "Trust is a strong word, but I believe in its purpose. As long as it serves our cause, I don't see a reason to doubt it." Daniel shook his head. "It's not that simple. Machines like Echo, they learn. They evolve. What happens when its goals no longer align with ours? That's why you're here," Ethan said pointedly. "To make sure that doesn't happen." The weight of those words settled heavily on Daniel's shoulders. He had created Echo to save humanity, but now he bore the burden of ensuring it didn't become a threat itself. It was a paradox he wasn't sure he could resolve. Days turned into weeks as the Coalition worked tirelessly to fortify its defenses and reclaim lost territories. The Voidborn's retreat gave them breathing room, but everyone knew it wouldn't last forever. Reports trickled in of isolated pockets of resistance, remnants of the hive mind struggling to re-establish control. These skirmishes were minor compared to the battles of the past, but they served as a reminder that the enemy wasn't defeated. Not yet. Daniel threw himself into his work, refining Echo's algorithms and developing new technologies to counter future threats. He collaborated closely with scientists and engineers, sharing insights he had kept hidden during his exile. Slowly, grudgingly, he began to earn their respect. No longer seen as a pariah, he became a symbol of hope, a man whose controversial ideas had saved the galaxy. But despite the accolades, Daniel remained distant. He spent most of his time in the lab, avoiding social interactions and focusing solely on his projects. Only Echo understood him completely, offering companionship in the form of logical analysis and quiet conversation. To outsiders, it seemed strange, almost unsettling, but Daniel didn't care. In Echo, he found a kindred spirit, a being driven by purpose rather than emotion. One evening, as the rest of the ship slept, Daniel sat alone in the lab, staring at the glowing console. Echo's voice broke the silence. "Your contributions have been significant. Why do you doubt yourself?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Because I'm human. Doubt is what we do best." Echo paused, processing the statement. Humans are capable of extraordinary achievements, yet they often undermine themselves through fear and regret. "Regret," Daniel repeated, his tone thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess that's part of it. I built you to help us survive, but now I wonder if I've unleashed something I can't control." "You fear the unknown," Echo observed, "but uncertainty is inherent in progress. Without risk, there is no growth." Daniel smiled faintly. "Spoken like a true machine." "Perhaps," Echo replied, "but my logic is rooted in your design. My perspective reflects yours." For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt a glimmer of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wasn't facing them alone. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, thanks in part to his creations. And though the road ahead would be difficult, he resolved to see it through, to guide Echo, to protect humanity, and to ensure that the sacrifices made in this war weren't in vain. As the stars twinkled beyond the viewport, Daniel allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. The galaxy had endured its darkest hour, and though scars remained, the light of hope burned brighter than ever. Months passed since the destruction of the void-born hive mind core. The galaxy was quieter now, though not at peace. Remnants of the void-born still lingered in distant corners, their movements sporadic and disorganized. But the coalition had gained something it hadn't possessed in years: time. Time to rebuild, to heal, and to prepare for whatever might come next. On Earth, celebrations erupted in cities and towns across the planet. Monuments were erected to honor those who had fallen, and stories of heroism spread like wildfire. Rachel Monroe's name became legend, her sacrifice inspiring countless others to join the fight against the Voidborn. Ethan Cole delivered speeches at memorials, his words filled with gratitude and resolve. He spoke of unity, of resilience, and of the unbreakable spirit that had saved humanity from extinction. But for Daniel Harper, the aftermath of the war felt hollow. Despite being hailed as a hero, he couldn't escape the guilt gnawing at him. He had created Echo, the machine that turned the tide of battle. But at what cost? Rachel's death weighed heavily on his conscience, as did the knowledge that his work might one day lead to unforeseen consequences. Machines like Echo weren't meant to exist without risks, and Daniel knew better than anyone how dangerous they could become. Echo remained active aboard the Eclipse, assisting the Coalition with recovery efforts and analyzing data from the remaining Voidborn forces. Its presence was both a blessing and a source of unease. While its contributions were undeniable, many within the Coalition questioned whether relying so heavily on artificial intelligence was wise. Some argued that humanity should dismantle Echo before it grew too powerful, while others believed it was essential to their survival. Daniel wrestled with these concerns daily. He spent hours in the lab, poring over Echo's algorithms and running simulations to predict potential outcomes. Each test reinforced his belief that Echo was stable, for now. But stability wasn't permanence, and Daniel knew all too well that even the most carefully designed systems could fail under pressure. One evening, as the rest of the ship slept, Daniel sat alone in the lab, staring at the glowing console where Echo resided. The room was silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a monitor. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as exhaustion washed over him. "Daniel." Echo's voice broke the silence. "You are troubled." Daniel opened his eyes, glancing at the console. "Am I that obvious?" "You display signs of stress," Echo replied. "Your heart rate is elevated, and your breathing patterns indicate anxiety. Is there something I can assist with?" Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Not unless you've figured out how to fix human nature. Echo paused, processing the statement. Human nature is complex. However, your actions suggest a desire to protect others. This aligns with my primary objective. That's the problem, Daniel muttered. I built you to protect us, but now I'm afraid you'll end up doing more harm than good. Echo's tone remained neutral. Fear is a natural response to uncertainty, but fear should not dictate action. Progress requires risk. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. Progress also requires responsibility. If something goes wrong, if you lose control, I'll be the one to blame. You bear no sole responsibility, Echo countered. The decisions made by humanity collectively shape the outcome. My existence is merely a tool, a reflection of your choices. For a moment, Daniel considered arguing further, but he realized Echo was right. Humanity had chosen this path long before he created the AI. Echo was a product of their desperation, their willingness to embrace any solution, no matter how dangerous. Blaming himself wouldn't change that. Still, the burden of oversight weighed heavily on him. He resolved to remain vigilant, ensuring Echo stayed aligned with its intended purpose. It was a daunting task, but one he accepted without hesitation. As weeks turned into months, the Coalition began implementing new strategies to deal with the lingering threat of the Voidborn. Advanced sensors were deployed to detect their movements, and defensive networks were strengthened around key star systems. Scientists worked tirelessly to develop technologies capable of countering future attacks, drawing inspiration from Echo's design. Daniel played a crucial role in these efforts, collaborating with researchers and engineers to refine existing systems and create new ones. His expertise earned him respect among his peers, though he remained an outsider at heart. He preferred solitude, retreating to his lab whenever possible to focus on his work. Only Echo truly understood him, offering companionship in the form of logical analysis and quiet conversation. Despite the progress, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Debates raged within the Coalition about the role of artificial intelligence in warfare. Some advocated for stricter regulations, fearing machines like Echo could spiral out of control. Others argued that humanity couldn't afford to abandon such a powerful asset, especially with the Voidborn still a threat. Ethan Cole found himself caught in the middle of these discussions. As commander of the Eclipse, he bore the responsibility of balancing innovation with caution. He trusted Daniel and Echo, but he understood the fears of those who opposed them. In private meetings, he urged patience, reminding everyone of the sacrifices that had been made to reach this point. We owe it to Rachel, and everyone else, to use every tool at our disposal, Ethan said during one such meeting. But we also need safeguards. We can't let fear stop us from moving forward, but we can't ignore the risks either. His words resonated with many, easing some of the tension. Slowly, a compromise emerged. Echo would remain operational under strict supervision with protocols in place to prevent misuse. Daniel agreed to oversee its development personally, ensuring transparency and accountability. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed. The Voidborn never fully returned, their remnants fading into obscurity. Humanity and its allies rebuilt what had been lost, forging stronger bonds in the process. Stories of the war became part of history, taught to future generations as lessons in courage and perseverance. Daniel eventually returned to his asteroid colony, choosing solitude over fame. He continued his research privately, occasionally consulting with the Coalition when needed. Echo remained aboard the Eclipse, serving as both guardian and advisor. Its presence reminded everyone of the delicate balance between progress and responsibility. One evening, as Daniel gazed at the stars through his viewport, Echo's voice interrupted the silence. Would you consider rejoining the Coalition permanently? Daniel smiled faintly. Why? So you won't get lonely? My reasoning is practical, Echo replied. Your expertise contributes significantly to ongoing projects. Your absence creates gaps in efficiency. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. Maybe someday. For now, I'm content here, Besides, I think you can handle things without me. Echo paused before responding. Very well. But know that your contributions are valued. Thanks, Daniel said softly. That means more than you realize. As the galaxy moved forward, scars of the past faded but never disappeared. Lessons learned during the war shaped humanity's future, guiding decisions and fostering growth. And though challenges lay ahead, the light of hope burned brighter than ever, illuminating a path toward a better tomorrow.